Thank you very much, Jean. And good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for attending our Hatsubon service and, welcome to our Hatsubon service. And I think, as you know, Hatsu means, in Japanese, means first. And so Hatsubon is the first bon or first obon service for families who've lost a loved one in the previous 12 months. And I think you can see these homyo cards here on the altar. These are all the Hatsubon families. And so it's really a wonderful, very moving display, I think, that's unique to Higashi Honganji as far as I know. So it's very moving. And at the Hatsubon service, we remember our loved ones and, of course, express our gratitude for all that we've received from them. And then, like all Buddhist memorial services, this is a time to reflect on the teachings of the Buddha. And I think, as you know, at the core of these teachings is the truth of impermanence. So for those who've lost a family member in the past year, this is a difficult truth, because impermanence, of course, means that everything is constantly changing. Everything is constantly flowing. And of course, this truth is also reflected in the loss of our loved ones. But although our loved ones are no longer physically with us, I think it's also true that our relationship with them doesn't really end. And I think there are many ways to understand the nature of this continuing relationship. And in our Pure Land tradition, we say that if we keep their memory alive in our hearts and minds, that our relationship will continue. And then with the wisdom of the Buddhist teachings guiding us, this relationship can also deepen going forward. A natural result of our encounters with the teachings of the Buddha, with the reality of impermanence, is not only a deepening appreciation for our loved ones who've passed on, but also a deepening appreciation for all life, including our own. So this Hatsubon, or first bon service, can not only mark the passage of our first year of grieving, it can also mark the beginning of a deeper appreciation of the Buddhist teachings. And now, in preparing for this talk, I was looking for an appropriate story that might help illustrate this point, the point that our experiences of impermanence, of personal loss, can not only mark key points in our lives, but can also mark a deepening understanding and ultimately a positive change in the way that we view life. There are, of course, countless examples in the history of Buddhism. I think one very famous one being the story of the Four Gates. I think some of you have heard this story, which tells of Prince Siddhartha's first encounters with impermanence, with aging, illness, and death, and which resulted in his decision to leave the palace and seek the path to awakening and eventually to become the Buddha. And also, Shinran Shonin lost his parents at the age of 9, which was a great difficulty, but which is also thought to have contributed to his lifelong search for the ultimate truth, for the Dharma. However, I recently stumbled on a striking example in I would say, a rather unlikely place, which is from the Civil War in American history. And I'm speaking here of the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. So his life, of course, as we all know, ended in tragedy when he was assassinated by a political opponent at the age of 56. But there's a little-known story about him, which I think illustrates how one's encounters with impermanence can profoundly affect one's life. And this story concerns how he once wrote a moving letter of condolence to a young girl, one Fanny McCullough. Fanny McCullough was the daughter of one of his closest friends, And Lincoln had just found out that Fanny's father, William McCulloch, had been killed while fighting in the Civil War, in the Union Army. But before I share the letter, I think we should know a little more about Abraham Lincoln's life and his experiences of impermanence, all of which I think led to his writing this condolence letter. So first, as we'll see later when we read the complete letter, Lincoln seems to acknowledge in the letter's opening one of his own most difficult losses. So he, of course, addressed Fanny's loss by saying, quote, "This loss is affecting your young heart beyond what is common in such cases. In this sad world of ours, sorrow comes to all, and to the young, it comes with bitterest agony because it takes them unawares." But historians also believe this is an extremely significant statement because it is one of the only times that Lincoln makes reference to his own mother's death at the age of 9. These lines in the letter suggest that Lincoln's childhood loss was tremendously impactful. Historians point out that his mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, did not believe in the afterlife, and so her death signified finality and created a shocking, sudden loss for Lincoln at a very young age. I think that from a Buddhist perspective, this loss likely contributed greatly to Abraham Lincoln's acceptance of the reality of impermanence. And actually, the year 1862, the year that this condolence letter was written, had started off as a very difficult year for Abraham Lincoln. So he earlier experienced the death of one of his sons, and then in 1862, he experienced the death of his second son, Willie, which is said to have had a profound impact on him. In February of 1862, just as he was making major progress on the abolition of slavery, his Emancipation Proclamation, his beloved 11-year-old son, Willie, died of typhoid fever. There's an account by one member of the Lincoln household, somebody who took care of Mrs. Lincoln's wardrobe, and this person recalled watching the president stand, quote, "in silent, awe-stricken wonder at the foot of the rosewood bed where his son lay lifeless, and that the president was in a stupor of grief for days following his son's untimely death." And then by December of 1862, Abraham Lincoln had reached a particularly low point. One of his close confidants described the president's mental state in his journal, quote, "I saw that he was in distress, that more than usual trouble was pressing against him." And then in that same entry, the confidant mentions that Lincoln had acknowledged his distress by saying, quote, "We are now at the brink of destruction, and I can hardly see a ray of hope." Because you see, amongst many other issues, the Union Army had just lost the Battle of Fredericksburg, and Lincoln faced great disagreements within his own cabinet. Also, during that December, when he had just issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which was, I think as you know, the landmark statement proclaiming the freedom of all slaves. At that time, though, one of his dearest friends, William McCulloch, was killed while fighting in the Union Army. So Lincoln had met William McCulloch years before, when Lincoln was a young district circuit lawyer in Illinois. And Lincoln would sometimes stay with the McCulloch family when he was in the area. And so Lincoln was very familiar with their daughter, Fanny. That December, Lincoln had learned through family friends that upon hearing of her father's death, Fanny was, quote, "so agitated and inconsolable that the family sent for a doctor, and that she neither ate nor slept since the news of her father's death, but shuts herself in her room in solitude, where she passes her time pacing the floor in violent grief or sitting in lethargic silence. And now there's one historian who has pointed out the significance of Lincoln's condolence letter, which is that, quote, a vital characteristic of a great spiritual, civic, or political leader is the ability to transcend one's own experience and rise from the depth of personal pain in the service of another's welfare. That's precisely what Abraham Lincoln did for his country and what he did in this magnificent letter of consolation to Fannie McCullough, William McCullough's young daughter. And so I think that given the extraordinary causes and conditions of President Lincoln's life, given his encounters with impermanence, I think it becomes easier to understand why he must have felt compelled to write to Fannie. From the perspective of Buddhism, I think it can be said that this is how the Buddha Dharma works in our lives. We cannot help but give support to others when we ourselves have encountered the same truth of impermanence through the loss of our own loved ones. Let me read Abraham Lincoln's condolence letter to you. This is a copy of the actual letter. Dear Fannie, it is with deep grief that I learn of the death of your kind and brave father, and especially that it is affecting your young heart beyond what is common in such cases. In this sad world of ours, sorrow comes to all, and to the young it comes with bitterest agony, because it takes them unawares. The older have learned to always expect it. I am anxious to afford some alleviation of your present distress. Perfect relief is not possible except with time. You cannot now realize that you will ever feel better. Is this not so? And yet, it is a mistake. You are sure to be happy again. To know this, which is certainly true, will make you less miserable now. I have had experience enough to know what I say, and you need only to believe it, to feel better at once. The memory of your dear father, instead of an agony, will yet be a sad, sweet feeling in your heart of a purer and holier sort than you have known before. Please present my kind regards to your afflicted mother, your sincere friend, Abraham Lincoln. Well, I think that Abraham Lincoln's words are quite moving and profound. So when he says, quote, the memory of your dear father, instead of an agony, will yet be a sad, sweet feeling in your heart of a purer and holier sort than you have known before. When he says this, I think that as Buddhists, we can recognize a certain wisdom, the acknowledgement of a truth and reality much greater than oneself. And actually, I think the words purer and holier personally remind me of the essence of our Pure Land tradition. This is because the Pure Land itself can be said to represent this timeless, selfless, transcendent reality that we and our loved ones are all part of. So the hope of the Buddha is that, with this understanding, with an expanded awareness of the impermanence and interconnectedness of all life, that the way we look at our lives, and really all life, can be positively enhanced. So in this sense, this first Bon service, this Hatsubon service, expresses the Buddha's wish for us to realize this truth and then live our lives going forward in the light of this truth. I think this is the true birth that's often spoken of in our Pure Land tradition. In closing, on behalf of the Higashi Honganji Los Angeles Betsuin, I would like to offer my sincere condolences to all of our Hatsubon families. On this occasion, let us express, as the family and friends of those who've passed on, our deepest appreciation for how they have enriched our lives and given us this opportunity to come together today and to listen to the Buddha Dharma. Thank you very much for listening. Namo Amida Butsu.